Civility in government. I am incredibly excited and intrigued by this next session. While we can't rely on our elected officials to restore civility in society, I think we can certainly insist that they exhibit it to their colleagues, to their opponents, and most especially to us, the citizen. We have assembled an incredible group of presenters here this afternoon, and I think each of them are going to build on one another, and that we will all walk out of here having a better idea as to what we can and should expect out of our government officials, what can work and what doesn't work, and what we as constituents need to be doing and insisting upon. Mayor Heidi Harmon first arrived in San Luis Obispo as a college student 30 years ago. She graduated with a degree in early childhood education from Cuesta College, followed by a BA in liberal studies from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, one of my wife's alma maters. After falling in love with the charm and community San Luis Obispo had to offer, Heidi put down her roots there in SLO. Fast forward a few years, and Heidi found herself as an overworked house cleaner and a multitasking single mom. Being a mom took center stage in her life, and she began to form the rest of her decisions around what it meant to raise children in today's world. She quickly found that the best way to build a better community was to raise better people. She deepened her commitment to the community by getting involved in local organizations that work to create a better world for all of our children. As a participant and board member of many local nonprofit organizations, Heidi has been able to work with local businesses, leaders, and community members to fully understand the scope of environmental, fiscal, and civic challenges her community faces. She is a strong voice advocating for people who have been left out of our political and economic systems. Heidi believes that democracy starts and ends with the voice of the people. And as the mayor of San Luis Obispo, she has worked tirelessly to honor, represent, and lift that voice. Heidi has been very instrumental in doing her part to restore civility not only in the government, but also in her community. And she will tell us in a moment that this has not been an easy trek. It's been fraught with a lot of roadblocks and obstacles. So with that, Mayor Heidi, we're very grateful you're here with us today, and we look forward to hearing about your experience. Please welcome Heidi Harmon.
I hope so. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. This is a topic that I think any of us in elected office, especially local elected office, have really struggled with and has very much impacted our communities and our jobs and democracy itself. So I thought I would I'll share some examples of some of the work that we've done here locally, and go into some detail around that so you can hear the language that we're using to try and create the kind of container for civility here in San Luis Obispo. And then I'm really looking forward to the breakouts to have more of a dialogue with some of you if you have any questions or ideas, and to exchange those ideas. But I wanted to start by just sort of amplifying, I think, what has been shared here to some extent too, that I'm really mindful before we get into the importance and the benefits and how you create civility at the local level. I am mindful of some of the criticism around civility, that it can have the impact of substituting a goal of unity and respecting both sides over directly confronting systemic racism or other important issues. And so I just want to start by saying that I agree with those that call for us to be clear that we don't weaponize civility as a silencing mechanism. I think those of us who have really engaged in civility can be accused of that. And so I'm sensitive to that, and I try and be very aware of that. Because unity of opinion is not possible or useful, or the goal, I think, of any of the work that we're doing. The goal of civility, as I understand it, is really to help us get to a place where we can talk about a unity of purpose. And that is something that I think is extremely useful and that civility really does serve. And so we're not talking about, or I'm not talking about not disagreeing, but I am talking about how we can, in fact, disagree without being disagreeable and without causing harm to each other, so that we can meaningfully engage and address the significant challenges that we face, because no crisis can adequately be met by a divided and disempowered people. Incivility certainly predates social media, but also certainly social media has really amplified it. So obviously, I know people have spoken about this. When we communicate on screens, we experience this kind of disinhibition, this disconnectedness, and this decrease in self-control. And I think that, plus the tone and tenor that's been cast at the federal level in the last 4 years, have really amplified this culture of incivility. And our democracy depends on folks being able to share their ideas and concerns. And so this crisis of incivility is huge, because I think it really keeps people from being able to participate in the democratic process. So what we've done here in the community of San Luis Obispo, for just reference, we're on the central coast of California. We're a small-ish town of around 50,000 people. We've actually done a lot, so I'm excited to be here to share that. One of the things that I did early in my term when I got elected was I partnered with all of the other mayors in SLO County, along with the chair of the Board of Supervisors here, so it represented a wide range of political views. San Luis Obispo City, I would say, is a progressive sort of donut hole in an otherwise relatively conservative and rural ring around us. And so there's a lot of different views here. So we frequently disagree with each other and with our fellow elected colleagues. But we were unanimous in agreement on one important point, that the caustic incivility across the current political landscape is damaging our democracy deeply, and not just at the national level, but at the local level. And I would say, honestly, it feels like especially at the local level. And so we saw a lot of danger ahead if we did not alter course and actively participate in civility as elected officials. And so that's why we all work together across the political spectrum to craft a regional code of civility. So that was really supported by extension by 40 elected officials serving on 8 different elected bodies, and including the County Board of Supervisors and the 7 city councils throughout our county. We all signed onto this code of civility because, as we see it, incivility, it has become, or had become, the new normal, and it's having a corrosive effect on our community and on our democracy, and sending too many citizens, leaving city council meetings literally, and also, of course, figuratively, and not participating. The Civility in America survey reflects what we've seen in our own community, that 60% of Americans say that incivility has led them to stop paying attention to political debates or conversations. And an equal number say that civility is deterring people from entering public service. And I can tell you from personal experience that, having been a mayor in the last 4 years, especially in the last year in particular, the lack of civility and the outright hostility and threats of violence has made mayors across the United States head for the exits. You might have seen that article in the New York Times. The survey also showed that the rise of incivility corresponds to lower voter turnout, and it's having a truly corrosive effect on the cornerstone of our democracy. People are literally no longer voting because of incivility. So people who have good ideas are declining to share their views, whether it's in public meetings, private conversations, or online, for fear of being insulted or ridiculed. Capable people who otherwise might be effective political leaders are deciding not to enter the arena because political discourse frequently becomes unnecessarily hostile. So, one more downside is that incivility often prevents us from recognizing that others with different viewpoints often have a worthy point. So we miss out on good ideas. And as an elected, that's something I need to be really mindful of for colleagues that have potentially stepped away from civility at times. They still might also have good ideas. So we have to be nuanced in how we hear people when they hopefully come back into the fold of civility, and we want to make sure that we can hear their good ideas. So we have this code of civility, which I'm going to get into the details of in a second. And I just want to also name that we recognize when we sign to this that some might think of our code of civility as an infringement on freedom of speech. This came up a lot in some of the city council meetings when folks were deciding whether to sign on to it or not, that it potentially devalues principled positions, or that it's just about requiring people to be nice. And so we, as electeds, respectfully disagreed. We don't feel like civility is about surrender or withholding emotion or stifling debate or limiting speech, or ignoring bigotry or abandoning beliefs. We think it's essential to welcome diverse opinions and that they should be championed freely and passionately, and to welcome disagreement and debate, and to be clear that disagreement based on principles is healthy for our democracy. However, democracy functions best when these passions are focused on debating the issues rather than demonizing people who disagree with us. We feel like the public and the news media also share in the responsibility for cultivating and reinforcing civility, but we also recognize as elected officials, we have to lead by example first and hold each other accountable. And so that's why we spoke up and stepped up together to chart a better course for our region. And so we hope that this regional code of civility encourage more people to step forward with their ideas and opinions, and hopefully motivate more people to run for office. And so here's a little bit from our code of civility. A healthy democracy respects the people's right to debate issues with passion. A healthy democracy not only tolerates disagreements, but it welcomes it in order to refine ideas and create policies that benefit the greater good. The deterioration of civility across the country and within our community poses a threat to our democracy and our civic well-being. And this deterioration compromises the integrity of a healthy representative democracy, closes the door on depth of thought, reducing complex problems to harmful oversimplification, deters potential leaders from running for office or serving in government. It poisons the civic well and discourages citizens from engaging on pressing community issues, casts the spotlight on poor behavior rather than shining a light on possible solutions, sets a poor example for our children. And we have crafted this code of civility as a promise to each other and to the people and the institutions that we serve, that we will always strive to conduct our debates, whether in person, online, or in written communication, in ways that allow for the widest range of opinions on ideas and policies, yet also respect the dignity, integrity, and rights of those with whom we might disagree. With our individual and collective commitment to this code, we welcome our elected colleagues, the press, and the public to hold us accountable in our deliberations. We pledge to, and then here is our pledge. And then I also just wanted to share that I now read this pledge at the beginning of every city council meeting to really anchor the city council meeting in these civility guidelines. And they are as follows: to listen first. We will make an honest effort to understand the views and reasoning of others by listening to understand, not listening to find fault, allowing thoughtful discussion to lead the best possible outcomes. Respect different opinions. We will invite and consider different perspectives, allowing for space for ideas to be expressed, opposed, and clarified in a constructive manner. Show courtesy. We will treat all colleagues, staff, and members of the public in a professional and courteous manner. And criticize constructively. We strive to advance solutions to community issues when faced with disagreement. And last but certainly not least, and I think this is the key one, for me anyway, debate the policy and not the person. We will focus on the issues and not personalize debate or use other tactics that divert attention from the issue. So that's been really useful in terms of grounding the entire meeting in civility. Another thing that we did, which I feel really excited and grateful for the League of Women Voters, I'm sure you're all aware, but in case you're not, you can Google them and find out lots more information about them. But I highly recommend getting your local League of Women Voters involved in your civility conversation. Our local league has been real leaders on this issue. They started by having a civil discourse task force. And what they were doing with that was kind of coming up with guidelines around what they were calling civil discourse. And they monitored local government for adherence to the principles of civil discourse through their task force. They had ambassadors and observers to ensure that local government agencies are aware of the importance of civility at public meetings and political discussions. And so I knew that that program was already happening, and I was seeing this lack of civility at our meetings at times, and certainly in the greater culture. And I partnered with them to create what we call the Democracy Concierge Program at our city council meetings, which sounds pretty fancy. But what it is several volunteers from the League of Women Voters are at our city council meetings every time out in front, and they facilitate the process. So they greet people, they help people understand what's on the agenda, how the agenda works, staff reports, they help them understand how to fill out speaker slips, and those types of things. And all of our speaker slips, so when you come to our city council meeting, you fill out your name on one side, and on the back, are printed those civility guidelines that I just spoke of. And so I think that has been really crucial to, again, grounding our city council meetings in civility. It's really hard to have point of contact with the wonderful women of the League of Women Voters, and there are some men too, and then come into a city council meeting and act like a jerk, basically. It's kind of like having, your mom at there, and you I think it really creates a really beautiful, subtle but really important container for civility. And we carried that on during COVID and had someone from the league reading a statement at the beginning of our Zoom meetings. And I'll just read one paragraph from that so you can get the sense of what that sounds like. Now is the time to come together to find common ground. Now is the time to tap into our humanity and remember that every human being in the city of San Luis Obispo is valuable, regardless of opinions or worldviews. And moreover, and more than ever, we need to see each other through a lens of compassion and empathy and find ways to connect with each other on a deeper level. We need to remember that we have more in common than meets the eye, that we are more than our professional alliances or memberships in various organizations, that we are also human beings, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, grandmothers and grandfathers, sons and daughters, residents of the beautiful county and city of San Luis Obispo and this great state of California. And we need to remember that we are all flawed and imperfect human beings, striving to find a more perfect union so that we can find the path to achieve a better new normal and a better new economy in the great city of San Luis Obispo. So welcome and thank you for showing up and exercising your civic duty today. So again, really beautiful, really human statement to ground our meetings. And I'll just close by sharing that another thing that I had to do personally as an elected was leave social media completely. The other electeds on this call I'm sure are familiar, but most of you may not be, that because of our positions, we're legally not allowed to block people or delete comments or do any of those types of things on our social media pages. And so for me, that just became a space that was so hateful and at times actively scary and toxic, that if I wasn't able to block some of those people that were blatantly extremely horrible, like racist, misogynistic, and all of those types of things, then that was a space that I couldn't be in anymore, because I couldn't really hold the container for civility in social media. So hopefully I'm hoping some folks have some great suggestions out there for that particular space, because I found that incredibly difficult to navigate. So we've done a lot on civility. I'm excited about that. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been able to be so successful in a lot of the policies that we've been able to pursue in the last 4 years since I've been mayor. The fact that we're not disintegrating in disagreements constantly really keeps us moving forward swiftly and in a really useful way, especially at a time when people really need us to show up most to really get them the solutions that they need at such a critical time. So thank you so much for the work that you've been doing on civility. And I'm really looking forward to learning more from my colleagues and having a dialogue with all of you during the breakouts.
Thank you, Heidi. And we very much appreciate your laying this out for us. It's my sincere hope that other municipalities can learn from your successes as well as your trials and tribulations. And I am sure we'll learn even more from each other during our breakout session.